Committee. Oops. Welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for January 24th, 2024. We'll follow our standard approach of going through the items that were listed in the agenda, which was issue number 1495 in the repo. Before we get started, are there any announcements that people would like to share? Okay. I don't.
Has been a few nomination, a few
Sorry,
successful
Antoine,
nomination.
I think you broke up.
Let me the names. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I think maybe you're a bit better now, but
Okay. Yeah, I was saying that there have been
is it just me or is it breaking? Is he breaking up? It's breaking up for everybody. Sorry, yeah, we can't hear you properly, Antoine. Sounds like we may have lost Antoine. I think maybe we'll move on and we can loop back if he makes it back in. So if I don't think there's any updates from the CPC or board meeting, I do see some people have engaged in the issue related to the travel fund update. So that's good. I just mentioned that last week. So again, if you are not aware, there's like a proposal for some, a slightly adjusted approach for the travel fund and requirements and stuff like that. So if you are interested, it'd be good to jump into that. And I guess Antoine, I think was trying to mention there's been 2 successful collaborator nominations. Which is great. Maybe Antoine, you can add the people's handles to the agenda item in terms of, okay, it was Lemire and Zibens. So welcome as new collaborators, and thanks for the past and future work. Okay, right. Let's move on to the issues. So I think the first one we wanted to start with was the events and collaborator summits for 2024. And Joy, I think you wanted to give us some updates on that front.
Yes, so we got a confirmation from the host company that they could host this. It took a while because we kind of struggled with the estimated capacity because initially the event that we tried to collocate asked for reserve slots, but they no longer, like, this is no longer a requirement. So this went through. We can have like a 30 to 35 room, a room that can take 30 to 35 people on April 3 to 4 in London. The question now is, with only 2 months away from the date, it may be difficult to get enough people showed up at the event. So my thinking is maybe we can do a poll for maybe a week, like until the end of this month, to see how many people plan to be there. And if we can get a number that can reach a critical mass, we'll move forward. Otherwise, we can move it to sometime later in the year when there's another event in London that we think we can collocate the collaborator summit with. So that's the current plan.
The one question, I think at one time there was some discussion of having like a node track at the conference. Is it sounds like maybe that's not a plan anymore, or we don't have enough time to do that.
That plan is currently uncertain, I think. There
Okay.
might still be one, but Mateo is not currently here. He's in touch with the event organizer.
Okay.
That is still something that can happen, but we are not sure at this point. But I think the poll can be run in parallel to this because
Right.
once we can confirm, we can still update everyone and people can edit their response or add new responses.
Okay. I just know sometimes, like if if there's a track and people have accepted talks at the track, they might have an easier time getting travel
Yeah.
funding. So they're kind of related,
Uh,
but I agree our time is short enough that maybe it's just worth asking, like, can you make it? Assuming there's nothing else, right? You're just coming for the collaborator summit.
yeah, my thinking is if people can already come, no matter they are going to the conference or not, they probably will just fill it in uh before the result about the event comes out. And if people can indeed come out after they got accepted, they can add new responses. But I think it's important to know whether we'll have enough people there. And if we already can know this soon enough, we can confirm it soon enough.
Yep, sounds good. So I guess is the question, like, does that plan sound good to people, or is it just more of an FYI and like you'll send out the survey?
Yeah, this is more like a question seeing to see if people are okay with this plan, whether because we're kind of running out of time as far as travel planning goes.
Sorry, can you just repeat what is the plan?
That we run a poll to see how many people are planning to attend the survey to attend the summit. So my plan is to send it out maybe today and wait for a week to see how many people are planning to like go actually. And
Right.
if we already
So,
get a number that's like looks like we are going to have a critical mass no matter what, we can confirm it soon. If we cannot get a number that's high enough, we'll just move it.
right. And assuming that it's London is alongside with the CDJS.
Sorry?
Assuming that it's alongside CDJS conf in London, right?
Yeah, it's separate from the CDJS conference, but it'll also be in London.
Oh, okay. So what
Right,
time?
like I mean, I think it's April 3rd to 4th, which is the key thing, right? So it'd be April 3rd to 4th in London. Which is, I think, Joey, that is lined up with CityJS, but not necessarily related.
Right.
Yeah, currently before we can get a confirmation from the event organizer whether they're going to have a Node.js track, that's just going to be co-located, but it's likely that they will allocate the track or have something special for us there. But we're not sure yet, at least until Mateo can comes in and confirm it because he's in touch with the event organizers.
Like on the specific question, and I think your plan is makes sense to me given timing and where we're at. Roy, still have your hand up?
Yeah. So the same subject, but talking about a different conference here. I would like to just put it on our radar. I saw that there are a bunch of our friends from Colombia just announced the conference coming up in October. I would like to propose that we may consider hosting the maybe not North America, but America's like maybe second half of the year. Consider hosting a collaborator summit there. So I think for now, like it's still kind of far away. I can just leave a comment on the issue and we can start from that. But yeah, I think in the past I've been there. I know some of our collaborators here also have been there before. So be nice to see what everybody thinks about it.
That sounds good, but I agree, a little bit separate. Anybody have concerns with Joey's proposal?
Nope.
Silence will be assumed as sounds good. So Joey, anything else you'd like to, like questions or stuff on that topic you want us to cover?
No, I think that's enough for the meeting. For others who can communicate asynchronously on CAP.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on then to the next issue, which is enable core pack by default. That's number 50963. We had a good amount of discussion last week, and we just still have it on the agenda because obviously there's still lots of discussion to be had. Miles Borns has showed up as a guest this week to add his viewpoints. I guess possibly from the NPM or personal position. I don't know which, but I'll let you cover that to kick things off.
Yeah, I come with many hats, but to be frank, when I, like speak in this venue, I am speaking with my hat as a Node.js maintainer, and as a fellow TSC member. Although it is obviously going to have some NPM bias based on my current corporate affiliation. I don't know how much we need to dig into it and build on it. I know that there's been, like a lot of conversations. I think really the most important thing that I think we should be doing as a project related to it, I feel like the questions are being framed incorrectly here. Enabling Corpac feels like a solution to the problem of enabling Yarn and PNPM for Node.js developers to, like, quote unquote just work, right? Like, I think the ultimate experience that we're talking about having here is shipping Yarn and PNPM with Node and ensuring that when someone installs the Node.js runtime, those commands just work. We had talked a bit about numbers that we see for usage over on NPM. About 25% of registry traffic is still coming from Yarn 1. Only about 19% of registry traffic is coming from NPM 10, which is actually like really great. Roy would know this from like how quickly adoption curves tend to be for the new client. But it's in 18, it's in all of the like LTS versions. But it also means like, hey, when we're looking at like what Node.js is shipping, only about 19% of the registry traffic is coming from supported versions of Node.js. Everything else is coming from like long tail other clients. About 60 something percent are, like clients that have been installed on older versions of Node. There's a scary amount that's coming from NPM 6, for example. I don't think people want to know. But very clearly, right, it is a large enough amount of traffic coming from both Yarn and from PNPM that I think it makes it really clear, these are tools that are widely used by the ecosystem, and by making extra hops or extra steps to support these things, I don't think that it is in the benefit of the Node.js broader developer community. With my NPM hat on, we don't want to use Corpac. There's a variety of technical reasons that I've provided inside of the issue for this, and whether or not you agree or disagree with these, I think hopefully we can all come to the same page that Corpac makes architectural decisions about how a client is provided to a developer that the NPM team disagrees with. Whether we're right or wrong, I don't think that there has been a historical precedent of the Node.js project like forcing certain architectural decisions, like on clients or as ways to be embedded. I think that when it came back to, and you look at the original thread regarding Yarn, Corpac came out of kind of technical constraints that were brought up to shipping Yarn in Node.js Core, but along the way has made a number of additional technical decisions, optimizing the experience for how the Yarn development team would like Yarn to be used. In the PNPM team, to the best of my understanding, reading the thread, seeing message from Sultan. You know, I don't think it's exactly what they would design, but they're perfectly comfortable with kind of riding along and being involved there. So kind of like in summary there, whether or not it shipped as core pack or it was just yarn or whatever, like I think that this is kind of plumbing details, to be frank. Whether or not we expose core pack enabled by default, I also think is kind of plumbing. Ultimately, what we're talking about is that if someone installs Node, yarn should just work. PNPM should just work. And I want to advocate that for those other clients. And I think from a governance perspective, we do owe it, if we are talking truly about fairness, to set some governance around how we would make future decisions for other clients. And selfishly and personally, I think that should not require core pack as a means of shipping in core. If we are saying that one of the requirements is that it's not directly embedded, it's not directly maintained, or it needs to be, you know, like fetched at runtime, we could discuss each of those for their own like technical reasons. I have feelings around all of them. But I think what doesn't benefit us is having to kind of debate that on a one-by-one basis, to set arbitrary constraints, or to force any sort of architectural decisions on potential future clients. So that's kind of like where I'm coming at it. I support the proliferation of clients. I support an equitable playing field for these various clients. And I think that it's 100% reasonable that if someone installs Node.js, that all three of these clients are just available to them. That's kind of where I'm coming from it.
Since nobody else has their hand up, I will put up my hand that while I personally agree it'd be nice if, you know, for example, we just bundled all of them. I don't see that, like personally, I see that as a challenge for the project, just in terms of CVE handling and extra work. And I think it comes back to that, like the fun, even that question of whether they should be included or not, is maybe one of the fundamental questions we need to answer for ourselves. But, you know, just because it would be easier for the end users doesn't mean as a project we can afford to do that, right? And just that's adding my 2 cents that like we have to consider the project in addition to the end users, because we can't just we have to factor in the work that it's going to take us to do things. So Richard has his hand up. I'll let him go next.
Well, yeah, okay, very good. I guess one of the things we have to point out is like there are complaints that the current situation is unfair, and yeah, it probably is. But I think you know, the situation we've got now is what we've got. So if we were starting from scratch and NPM currently wasn't bundled with Node, I think there are there are things and considerations like, you know, we know at the moment as a project we've historically had some difficulties with NPM over like release timings and, you know, NPM not having a long-term support strategy. So, you know, those are things that if we start talking about criteria for bundling stuff into Node, we may still have situations where, you know, the desirable criteria for including with Node, people will turn around and say, well, hold on a minute, you know, NPM doesn't necessarily meet those. But yeah, I mean, I do share your concerns over things like, you know, keep things up to date, patching, you know, proliferation of having to do more security releases potentially. But yeah, I mean, the situation is not equitable, and I think there are decisions that we've made that, you know, historically, and I mean, you know, we are carrying historical baggage, so that influences the decision. That there is an ideal situation, which is if we were starting from scratch, how would we design this, and what criteria would we put around things for inclusion? But the fact is that, you know, we have shipped NPM for a number of years in Node, so not shipping it, which is one of the other things that came out of discussions, you know, I think that would be severely detrimental to the ecosystem as a whole. So yes, we can look at things and making things fairer for the other package managers, but I do think that, you know, there will still possibly be an unequitable situation, which is that we may put, you know, we may decide that there are the barriers for new things being included is higher than, you know, if NPM wasn't here, it might not meet those in the future.
Now, Miles, you have your hand up next.
Yeah, I want to talk to like the bundling and security thing that was raised. And like I recognize that this is a challenge, but I look at our deps folder and we have quite a number of deps in there, ranging from like, libuv and v8, which obviously we need, but we bundled Ndichi, we've bundled NGHTTP2 when we needed that. We have ICU in there. We have the CJS module Elixir. We've bundled tons of different things into Node.js that has never reached like this level of debate, discussion, and concern. So I do think that there is a bit of inconsistency there. To be frank, I recognize that clients are something that people use directly, so it's not exactly the same as something that we're embedding directly into NPM that may not be directly impacting folks. And then the second bit, Michael, before I hand it over to you, because I can tell you have a response ready. But I also think that in relationship to this, it has been claimed that Core solves some of these problems in that we don't directly ship, the versions of these clients within the Node.js core, and thus are no longer on the hook for the CVEs. And I actually want to call that one out as something that I think it's kind of kicking the can. Because if we're saying that it's critical that people are using clients that are not vulnerable, there's a whole thing about version pinning inside of repositories that makes me icky about that. But without even going into that, like there is a like last known good release inside of Core that points to like whatever the latest good known version is. And one would argue that if a client were to come up with security vulnerability, like we should do a security release and bump that version. The fact that the source code doesn't ship within Node.js does not mean that the default experience is not using a vulnerable client. And so I do want to call out that I think there has been some claims implying that basically the Core solves that maintenance burden, and I would like to say that it doesn't, and that it would behoove the project to kind of, whatever we're shipping, if whether or not the code is directly delivered. We still should do security releases if the default experience would be serving something that is, known to have security vulnerabilities.
I'll add in that I think part of the difference is like when you say, oh, we got lots of other dependencies, I'll just say our package manager has been one of our biggest sources of work. And so therefore it's not quite the same. We have some that we put in and we only have one of each of those, right? Like, so it's like we need one because we have to do the functionality. So I don't think that really flies in terms of like, yeah, so you can package three of the same thing, right? Like that's what we're talking about is like, let's take on more work in the project to make it easier for the end user, which we do. But it comes down to, at least for me, it's like how much value we're providing versus how much work we're taking on. And going back to the CVE part, like I think what we'd really like is not to have the like, be responsible for the CVs for any package manager. But as Richard says, we have history. So, we don't want to break the ecosystem by removing NPM. But that doesn't mean we want to add 3 times that by adding additional ones. And I do, in some sense, the like Core was modified to always include the latest version of the package managers to address your comment about the CVEs. But personally, I still do have some concerns, and it's part when I weigh into some of the discussions. I think we need to be very clear, and people like you shouldn't just type in yarn and it installs something and works. You should at least acknowledge in some way that you have asked for some external package to be installed and it's not part of Node, right? To address those like, hey, yeah, we're not going to update Node because you asked for that to be installed. It's like you're clear, you've installed it, and therefore, yeah, you can update it if you need to. Jeffrey has his hand up.
All right. I was just gonna say, like, it sounds great in the abstract that, like, yeah, let's let users run yarn and pm without needing to install them, like, fairness reasons and easy, just make things easier for people to take out a step. But And if you were to like propose that for like up for a vote among the collaborators, I'm sure like everyone would say, yeah, sure, that sounds great. But it's sort of like, well, at what cost? You know, like, do we want to provide this at the cost of bundling these package managers or at the cost of dealing with security vulnerabilities or Semver or maintaining core pack or, you know, like all these other things. And I'm just not sure that I don't know if there's a version of, you know, do you want to make these run for without an install step if the cost is blank and the menu of options? I don't know if there is an option that a majority of collaborators would say, yeah, this feature is so valuable that it's worth that cost for any of the options that we can think of. I mean, maybe that's like almost, I mean, I feel like that was like, that should have been the very first thing that was done before 2 years of effort got spent building Core Pack. But, you know, here we are.
Miles has his hand up next.
Yeah, Michael, you still have your hand up as well.
Yeah, okay, I'm lowering it.
But
Yeah,
but
go for it.
I think that this kind of surfaces that like first core question that I feel like needs to be answered as a project, which actually has nothing to do with Core Pack, which is, are we going to ship these additional clients and take on the responsibility that comes with that? And I think that Core Pack tries to address some of the concerns that are being raised as far as like maintenance concerns. And I think then that kind of maybe raises the question of like, well, are those maintenance concerns actually being appeased? James, you have your hand up.
Sorry, I had to unmute. I actually I do think that the distinction here, that the fact that Core Pack is not actually shipping and bundling these other clients with the distribution, and shipping a installer, you know, something that'll pull these down if they're used. I think that's an important distinction here that we shouldn't lose. You know, I've not seen a lot of call for saying, okay, Node should ship with all of these alternative clients. One, it's just not sustainable. If another client comes up, we're gonna bundle and ship that as well. If another one comes up, we're gonna bundle and ship that as well. As opposed to, here's a way of getting the one that you want easier. And you know, and just kind of bootstrapping that a little easier. I think that's I want to make sure we don't lose that distinction here. It's not just about whether we bundle all these clients in and ship them by default or not. You know, there are multiple options. It's, yes, we have the option of bundling them all as dependencies. Two, we have the option of shipping a easier way of installing them, getting them, bootstrapping it. Or three, we only ship one. Or four, we don't ship any.
Yeah, I'll add to what James just said. Is I do think, like, personally, I think like and not speaking for everybody because I know people have different values, but like I think it's not feasible for us to bundle them all, right? But at the same time, if we can come up with a solution that makes it easier for end users, but doesn't require the project to take on the bundling, maintenance, space, and all that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. My only remaining concerns are like, does it appear, and I think Miles, you sort of pointed this back, we have to avoid us doing something which users can reasonably expect that we should have that ownership and bundling, ownership and like doing CVs and stuff because of the way it's implemented. As long as we make sure that they clearly understand, then, you know, maybe we're okay. That's kind of where I'm coming from. Miles, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and I guess the claim that I would make here is I think implying that Core Pack solves that is a bit of sleight of hand, to be frank. Most people will not care about the implementation. What they'll know is that I installed Node.js on my machine, and after doing it, yarn works and PNPM works. And so with that in mind, like, we can discuss the implementation details. It doesn't ship the bits. It's a jumper binary. Like, but ultimately, for most people, there is something on my machine that wasn't there before I installed Node. is that thing introducing vulnerabilities to my machine? Now, when we talk about, and James, I think maybe this is what you're talking about, and Michael, I'm sure that this is something that matters to you in like Red Hat. Things that do static code analysis won't hit on these things. But I'd argue that's not the feature, right? Like this starts introducing dynamicism. That means that like someone can run yarn on that box, but all existing static code analysis won't actually hit on it. And now static code analysis tools need to now understand how Corpac works to understand that the environment is going to dynamically bootstrap itself the second that someone tries to run that command, because that command will work. And this is kind of why I say sleight of hand, which isn't meant to be dismissive. I think that all of the same responsibilities that we have for NPM exist if we're shipping a tool that enables these things. Now, I don't think that as it is right now, where you have to explicitly Corpac enable these things, right? Then someone is opting in to installing Yarn. Someone's opting in to installing PNPM. But if the Yarn PNPM binaries are available, whether or not they're jumpers, then there is a responsibility that the Node.js project has to shipping that.
Yeah, I guess this is where I kind of see the distinction of like having something that says you have to enable it helps us to say like, no, it's not part of it. And even if like the first I saw some PR, and I'm not sure if it was related to this, but I think it looked a little bit like, they were talking about adding other ones. If the first time you run Yarn, it pops up something and says, hey, I'm about to install Yarn for you. Be aware this is not shipped as part of Node.js. We won't do security releases, blah, blah, blah. You put all the text in and somebody has to say yes. That moves us closer to the, people should be aware that they've installed something else. It's kind of like, I look at it as like the package manager installs. We ship the package manager. When you say npm install, you've asked npm to install a whole bunch of stuff. We don't take responsibility for any of that stuff. We're not going to do CVs because npm has installed something that you've asked it to, right? If we kind of look at it in the same way, if Corpac is saying like, you've asked me to install Yarn and it's clear, like the magic, hey, you just type in Yarn and it works and it's installed something without you even knowing, then I'm like, Miles, I kind of agree. We have some sort of like, that's too much magic. And so people can have that expectation of like, well, if it's going to install the wrong thing, then it is kind of on us a little bit. Versus if we've made it clear, then that's where I maybe James is a little bit as well. Like there are perhaps some options and a place where we could come to that says like we've threaded the needle, right? And even if we don't think it's perfect what we have now, there still may be a way to thread the needle that says like this balances the clarity in terms of us not actually being on having packaged it versus ease of use for the end user.
I just really quickly, I'm so sorry, I have to run. I want to just like also make it clear, I have limited time, but I'm happy to put some of that time into finding a resolution here. And I am very much in support of creating an equitable environment for the various clients. So, I'm just want to make it clear, that's where I'm coming from here. I got to drop, but happy to jump on future calls or other threads. Just let me know how I can help. Thank you.
Sure. Yep. Thanks for coming. Bye. Any other like follow-up or discussion that people want to add?
Yeah, I'll just I was going to say something that Miles put in the chat. So your point about installing things and having upfront questions or statements, sort of disclaimers or whatever you have it. That is pretty similar to how npx works in npm. So that's where you run some arbitrary package that it has to go and fetch from the registry. And I guess I guess the current design of Corpac is in a similar situation where you're running something that's going to go off and fetch something from somewhere else. And in the npx case, it does now asks you before going to do that fetch, this is going to install this, proceed yes or no.